Success, it has been said, is not the absence of failure, but going from failure to failure without any loss of enthusiasm. My name is BJ Garmillion, and I am the host of the Rush to Fail podcast. This podcast was created to highlight and learn from others who have turned their failures into success in hopes that it will both inspire and encourage others to push through their trials and to not be afraid of short-term failure. Our mantra on this show is to fail often, fail forward, and rush to fail.
Welcome to the Rush to Fail podcast. I'm your host, BJ Garmillion, and today I have Amanda Dean with us. And so Amanda is with Sharper Business Solutions. They are a company that actually we've used in the past. They are incredible to work with if you are looking for someone to help out with your business and just consulting. And, they do a fantastic job, really A to Z. They can kind of help out with all sorts of different solutions. Doesn't really matter the size of your business either. And so anyways, we love Gary and his company. And how long have you been with them, Amanda?
It's been a little bit over a year. So working as a fractional COO with a lot of companies.
Okay. Awesome. Cool. So Amanda has a ton of experience actually. So I'm learning more about her. So Amanda, I was introduced to her through our Collective Genius. And so love the group because you get to meet so many incredible people. And so I reached out to Leon, who's one of the guys that helps, run the organization. And I just said, hey, Leon, look, I think I'm getting really top heavy when it comes to talking to men in the industry. And so I need to know who I need to talk to that are incredible, business owners that are, at the top of their game. And so I was like, I just need to know some other females, some women that I can talk to and bring on the show. And so you came up right off the top and he said, hey, look, first reach out to her if she's got time. She's incredible. And so, yeah, this is fun for me because I get to learn more about your story. We get to be on a podcast together. And this is like my version of golf, right? So I don't golf. Instead of that, I do podcasts so I can, pick people's brains for, 30, 45 minutes, get to know them a little bit better. And so thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited. Yeah, Leon's mutual, one of my favorite people in the world, one of the most amazing human beings on this planet. Also a wealth of useless information. I love that man loves to just learn things that you will never use in real life, but it's awesome.
That is funny. I need to talk to him more about that. I did not realize. So he's just like one of those curious people that just.
He really is. I always say if I'm ever going to go play trivia, I want Leon on my team, right? Like the amount of things that I learned just listening to him in podcasts. I'm like, how would you even know that? Like, really? So he's just one of the amazing human beings. But it's one of those things that most people know. Like he loves just information.
Yeah, love it. No, he is. You'll never find someone that does not have great things to say about Leon. So yeah, he's one of the best in the industry. Love that guy a ton. And so yeah, I'm grateful right now that he was able to connect us. And so yeah, tell us a little bit about your career. And maybe even before we go into your career, tell us a little about your personal life. Do you have family? Maybe fill us in a little bit on that.
Yeah, awesome. So married 25 years. I should know that. It's in that range. Wow. But we have 4 children. All grown. Youngest just went to college just in the last year. So, been in Nashville for the last 20 years and just relocated to Florida. So kind of in the North Nashville or the North Jacksonville side of area. So it's been a journey, but I was a former COO. I say former because I still consult with them a little bit too. But for the last 20 years, joined Collective Genius, I want to say, almost a decade ago. We were doing maybe 50 deals a year. When I stepped down as COO, we were, multiple entities, multiple businesses, doing about 250 to 300 transactions a year. So a great leadership team. It was a great team. But, I know you've got young kids, it's kind of one of those things where I planned. I was like, hey, once my youngest goes to college, I don't know that I want to be doing this level. So it's awesome. It was great to step down. I still love that team, still talk to them, but I get to work with other teams now that I'm with Sharper. So I get to take my experience over the last 20 years and really help other businesses, whether they're a team of 2 or, I have a team of 60. Everybody kind of has challenges, whether that be marketing or leadership or hiring. So I really, really enjoy getting to work with other teams and really getting to bring my experience in this industry just to other people's offices to kind of help them grow.
Wow. No, that's a lot to unpack right there. So being a COO for 10 years, working with a company for 20 years, especially a company of that size that they're doing, 200, deals a year, that's a lot of volume in this industry. And that's a big reason why I love the Collective Genius, because there's so many different people like that. Like, that's not uncommon necessarily to come across people like that. But to be the COO of that obviously speaks volumes about you and your abilities. And then, of course, I know that, Gary and Susan, they don't just hire anyone. I'm sure that, they like to find people that are at the top of their industry, top of their game, and bring them on so that they can then help other people on their journey to hopefully one day get to that point, with their business. And so I'm curious, which did you enjoy more? And I don't know if you can answer that or not, but was it more enjoyable to just have one company and that was your focus and that was every day, it was just the, very laser focused? Or do you prefer the variety? I'm just curious.
I prefer the variety. I do. And I loved running the business. And, everybody's like, why would you step down from that? And I'm like, one, because I had a really good leadership team, right? And the longer I'm sitting in a seat, I'm hindering growth from other people, and you kind of get to a certain place where you look back and you go, okay, this company's a really good spot. They really don't need me past this point, where most people are like, cool, you should have put it on autopilot and just, went with it. And I was like, I don't have it in me, right? I just don't have it in me. I always joke and tell people, I'm like, I have the right to remain silent. I lack the ability. I like to be doing stuff. I like to be staying busy. So it was time. Like, I could have absolutely stayed there and done phenomenal. But, there's a lot of great people on that team, and they all wanted to grow and do different stuff. And, you just didn't need me anymore, and that's kind of cool that, kind of me and Ren Bartlett talked about, it's like, I hired myself out of a job, right? That's awesome to get to be able to do that. So I really do enjoy working with other teams. I do love the variety, but I love that team. Like, that's like my heart and soul is still with that company.
So cool. I love that. Because, you're just looking, okay, what's next, and I'm with you. I think that there does come a point where, maybe, and I think this happens with coaches quite a bit, like in sports, where it's almost like, okay, they've heard the same voice over and over and over again. They're like, okay, I get it. I already know what you're going to say before you say it. So we need some like fresh, perspective and to kind of get to the next level. Because I think that's one of the most difficult, and I would love for you to speak to this actually, because you now get the opportunity to look at all sorts of different businesses at different phases and stages of their business cycle. But I'm curious because, at what phase of business would you say is the most difficult for a company to grow? Like, what is one of because I know that there's like infancy, you just started out, euphoria, and then it goes all the way up to, hey, like, where you guys were probably at after 20 years, where you're like, hey, we're doing 250 deals and this is kind of on autopilot. But I'm curious, as the progression goes, what was maybe like, what are the hardest years that companies go through?
So many. I always laugh and tell people, like, how'd you get there? It's like, well, it was a lot of 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, right? Kind of getting punched in the face, be willing to move forward. I think a lot of people kind of get paralysis of analysis. They just don't know what to do next. I'm like, well, just make a decision, right? It may not be the right decision, just got to go with it. But I'd say hiring is when we get to where we need redundancy. When we get to where we kind of need maybe 2 people in a role versus 3, like there's this challenge of like, we're at capacity, right, with resources. So I want to say the resource age, probably what I feel is the hardest. We have a resource for each role, but we don't have any redundancy. We know we want to grow, so we're kind of at capacity here, but if we hired another person for that role, like a 2 people in that role, maybe that's too much. So it's such a finicky place to scale right there when you're like, I need more support, I need more resources, but I don't necessarily have the business for 2 to 3, on additional roles. So that growth in resources is really tough. When people ask me, what's the most challenging part about this business? It's the people. It is the people. It's hiring the right people. It's finding the right people. It's when do we hire them? How do we train them? This is a people business. People think that it's a real estate business, but at a certain level, it's a people business.
Totally agree. Yeah. So what are some of the, I guess, most common mistakes that you see that business owners make or that people make as they're trying to grow their company? What are maybe a couple of the mistakes that you just see over and over again where you're like, I see this all the time?
Well, there's definitely some in hiring. I was just letting somebody on go marketing. marketing and just kind of lead management is the one area that I kind of get into a lot with teams when they're like, I need more leads. I need, what are marketing channels? We really want to dig into it. Should we do TV? Should we do PPC? Everybody knows like the same marketing channels. And they're like, we just don't have enough leads. I'm like, okay, well, let's look at that, right? Let's go through the numbers, and I can easily look at the numbers and be like, what does this look like? Let's dig through here. And so some of the things that I see so often is people are just always trying to generate more leads, but they're not doing is making sure they're actually handling the leads that they have. Like we talk about it, right? It's that leaky bucket. I could tell you some horror stories. I know you love stories, so I have some, but we dig into that. It's like people will just spend more money because they feel like they need more leads. And so often I see this over and over. They don't really know what's happening with the leads that are coming into their business. So you're spending more, but it's like you go out and buy a new outfit, but you got an outfit in the closet, it's still got tags on it, you never wore it, but you're just out shopping, right? And it's like, yep. Do you have a marketing problem or do you have a lead management problem?
Yeah. What are some of the most egregious examples? You don't have to give any names, obviously. We're not going to do that. But I would love to hear maybe some examples where you're like, your jaw hits the floor. You're like, you got to be kidding me right now. Like, are we really hearing this,
Yeah, so many. You're going to love some of these. And I'll be honest with you, this happens. This happens every day. I don't care if people are like, oh, it's not me. I challenge you on some of that stuff.
Yeah. Totally.
I was working with a team not long ago, it was this year, but they're, talking about marketing. And so I'm like, okay, cool. Let's look it up. That's one of the things I go in there. When they want to talk marketing, I'm like, put your big girl pants on, because here's what it is. I'm fixing to tear your marketing apart. I'm fixing to go through it. We pull up a Google account, right? And it's like, oh, we got this great number. We do this. It's not even their number. They don't even know whose number it is that's been on their Google business account page for who knows how long. It's not their number. Right? Same with a different client, went to their website and we look at it and somebody at the team, we do a lot of meetings with teams in person. They're like, whose number is that? I was like, that's, it's not your number. They're like, I don't think that's our number. And I say that tongue in cheek. This happens a lot. So we call it. Sure enough, some random guy answers the phone. He's like, you got the wrong number, and hangs up the phone. They don't know how long that number's been on their website, But I guarantee you more and more people think they'll test something or they'll change stuff, but they don't actually go back through. They will write a check all day long for $20,000, $30,000 a month in marketing and do not take the time to go back and actually check, like, what does that customer's journey look like? I was working with a team, and I have so many out there. Just throw some out there.
I love it. Just keep going. This is good.
But, they're like, oh, gosh, it's just the marketing's not working. It's this and that. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let's double check that. Because in my experience, it's not usually just the marketing, right? So I called the number. And I was like, you know what? Let's see what that looks like, right? Let's test it out. I want to see what your lead management, like what that looks like. So we call the number. We're going to lunch, right? Me and his owner. So I call the number, 2 rings, goes to voicemail. Just voicemail. That's it. I was like, okay, let's see if it calls back, right? I could tell that his blood pressure was just boiling. 4 hours later, we're still together. Nobody's ever called me back. Nobody ever called me. So what's the rule with responding to stuff? So even that, I was working with the team just earlier today, testing out their marketing on their website. I'm like, okay, I'm going to send a chat. I'm going to send a web form. Like, what does that look like? So they got the web form, had a whole chat conversation with somebody on their website. They never got it. Called their number also from their website to just test them out. Never called me back. I'm still looking because I'm supposed to get back with them. So I can call me back. Most people think they have a marketing problem. And it's not to say that we're bad marketers. Like, most people know what they do, but again, when you ask me, what do you see over and over again with teams? That's kind of a big one, right? People will go back. That's so funny because that team just called me back. Work on them a couple hours later.
I was just going to say, was that them right there?
Them, yes, absolutely. But I always tell people, like, just setting up a process. And I know these things because I learned these things. So I loved your podcast, right? Rush to Fail. It's like, how do you know this? I'm like, I know this because I was this person. I was the person that sent out 5,000 postcards and realized I put the wrong phone number on it. Like, it happens. Like, but having somebody that goes through that, checks your phone numbers, and another client up in New York, the owner happened to notice it. He was like, hey, I don't see anything. So he gets in there and starts testing all these marketing numbers, right, that they have. Half of them go nowhere. Like people, like we create all these numbers for different campaigns. So when I say that to be, when everybody's like, I need more marketing, I need to do this. I'm like, before we even consider like, what do we need to do for marketing? Like, what are we doing with the leads that we're getting? Like they feel like they're just not getting it. Another team, literally yesterday, it was so funny. It's not funny. I say that. It's awful. It's not the intent whatsoever.
Yeah.
Their lead management, we go in and we look at the numbers and I'm like, let's go through your conversion. Let's go pull your phone system. Let's look at this. They were going to hire a third lead manager. Their missed call rate was 88%. That means out of the 200 people that had called, and they only put a website on their direct mail, they only put a phone number, they only answered the phone 12% of the time. So do you feel like you need more leads in that situation? These are good teams. And I say that, and I really want to be specific. These are not mom and pop shops. These are not people one or two. These are people with whole teams that are doing, 50 to even 150 deals a year. So in one of those areas, everybody's like, if you could give one piece of advice to somebody in this industry, would you be like, test your marketing, test it on a regular basis. Like go in, what is your customer's journey? What's your seller's journey? What's their experience with chat? What's their experience with the web form? What do they see when they go online? Like, I'm like, if you really want to do better, like fix the holes in your bucket. Don't just feel like this marketing channel is not working. Like I just need to go spend more money. We can all spend more money, but it's not necessarily going to drive a different result. Sorry, I probably went down a rabbit hole in that one.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. That last one where, the answer rate is over 85%. Like that just kills me. Yeah, as a business owner, I don't think there's anything that will kill you more. Like that would just seriously, you might as well just stick a knife right into my heart if I find out that that's going on, or that their number doesn't even go to the right person. But you're right. Like these are all things that have happened to all of us. Like as a business, I've had exactly the same type of situation where we've been in that situation. So it happens to everyone. And the reason why I love talking about these failures is that, hey, hopefully this will stick out to someone. They'll be like, you know what, maybe we should do that. Like maybe we should go just verify that our phone number works and that our website looks good. And something that we do, and I'm sure you guys implement this all the time, with Gary and his team, but we use, traction. And so we have our level 10 meetings. And what we always say is we have a portion of the meeting that is the audit portion, and everyone's expected to fill that out. And so on a weekly basis, we'll go through like our website and Google. And I kid you not, every single week, there is something that is broken that someone found that they're like, I clicked on the YouTube link on the website and it goes to a blank page. And you're like, it's been there probably for a year and didn't even know that. So thank you for just taking the time to look at those kind of things because they're everywhere. So love that. Fix the holes in the bucket before you focus on, spending more hard-earned money on marketing. Oh man,
everybody always wants to know, where should I spend the money? What's the best marketing channels? And these are all important questions. Don't get me wrong. Like I absolutely love marketing. We could talk for hours, but I always I go back there. I'm like, before we talk about where can we spend more money, let's talk about what that looks like first, right? Because unless you got a really good organization with a really good team and everybody's doing what they need to happen, then again, you're just pouring water in the boat and it's just sinking faster than, you can pay money or you can put money into it. So that's always like, if I had to give one piece of advice in this industry, I'm like, on a regular basis, like audit your team, audit your processes, and what's your customer's journey, right? Like I think people in this industry are always talking about how can we do better for us, like as a team and things. And like, question should be, how are we better for our seller? How do we make it the easiest process for them as possible? What does that look like for them? Then we work on the internal. But we'll make things 3 times easier for us, but the seller may have to talk to 5 different people. And so it's like, well, the process is for each person in each department. I'm like, that's great. That seller talks to 5 different people. Like, how is that the easiest solution for them? So, it's just one of the things that we work with people with Sharper. But I just had that experience recently. I've been working with a lot of teams, and it's just coming up recently. So, it's something that's kind of relevant right now as we kind of go into the spring season. Everybody's like, should I increase the budget? Should I spend more money? I'm like, well, we can, and I encourage you to, if we've got a really good team and we've stress test all of our processes and, we filled all the holes. Until such time, you could just be spending more money to spend more money.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so another question that I have that I'm interested in learning more about is, you mentioned that people, like, this is a people business. It's not a real estate business, and I've heard that a lot. It really is. It's a marketing business, right? It involves people, and that is really going to be determine your success. Is the type of people that you have, and if they're in the right seat, and the things that they love. So I'm curious, when you are hiring or when you're talking to people about their hiring process, what tools do you recommend that they use when they're looking to onboard someone and hire a new person? How do you recommend that they screen them and find the right person?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people in this industry, and if they're not familiar with predictive index, right, I think a lot of us use that tool as a kind of an assessment tool, which is a phenomenal one, right? But even the cognitive assessment is a really good one too. And so I always tell people, I think it's not an IQ test, right? It's not what we're measuring. Mm-hmm. But I love the PI because we can really establish what we're looking for, right? Like, we kind of have an idea. So I always encourage teams, first of all, create an avatar, right? Create a profile for that role. Like, there's things that, like, we just need to hire. I'm like, no, you need to you need to prepare for a hire before you just start hiring. So how do we, what's the avatar we're looking for? Do we have a hiring scorecard? Do we have a PI assessment, a predictive index assessment, which is another tool that we use with Sharper? We can do cognitive assessments, and there's some other really good assessments out there based on the role. So often people just hire, and people laugh because they hear me say all the time, they'll hire for right now, not the right person, right? And we really don't want to do that. They'll be like, well, I'm going to hire somebody this quarter. I'm like, well, how do you even know you're going to have the right person that applies this quarter? Like, for me, what I'm really looking for is, am I getting quality candidates? If I get enough quality candidates, like, that's my KPI. If I'm getting quality candidates every week, the chances I'm going to hire the right person are extremely high. But if I just say, I'm going to hire somebody, I saw one not long ago, somebody's saying, they're like, 2 weeks, hire this person. I'm like, so what you're saying is you're going to hire the best person out of the group of 5 people in front of you at the time, and not necessarily the best person for that role. And we all know that a bad hire costs us thousands of dollars in time that we can't get back, onboarding and training. And so, really kind of identifying, people are like, well, do you hire around the predictive index? And I'm like, yes and no. It is a tool. It is a resource in the hiring process, right? Like, we take their resume, we look at their experience, their head, heart, hand, and feet, what's their experience, what's their assessment look like, do they have the capability to grow? What does that look like? Like, there's lots of different pieces to the puzzle that I'm looking at. It's not just the PI, and it's not just their resume. Like, we want to get as much of a complete picture as possible. I also use the top grading. Have you been into top grading before?
Grading? I haven't.
It's a fantastic tool. It's a book by Bradford Smart. We were turned on to it years ago, but it's a hiring methodology, because everybody always wants to know past that. Like, we use the assessments, right? But it's a hiring methodology about hiring A players, putting them, the questions to ask, the series to put them in. It's really good. I've had great interviews with people, an hour long in, and they'll get up and be like, you know what? I don't think this is a job for me. And I'm like, thank you. You just saved me 6 months of my life. People are so like, I just got to get this role hired. And I'm like, you're going to be right back here again in 3 to 6 months if you have the attitude of like, I just got to get somebody in that seat.
No, I love that. And I do want to get to some stories or examples of occasions where you've gone into businesses and been like, holy smokes, whoever that person is in that organization, you need to, get rid of that person, or you need to hire this. So I guess a quick story to that on our end. Gary came to our office, and this was, 4 years ago, maybe around there, 3 or 4 years ago. And at the time, it was just my business partner and I, and then, we had a contractor that was becoming a third partner. And it was interesting because within the first, it's so nice to bring in outsiders, right? That come to your, because so many times there's an echo chamber that happens in your business, and you just think everything's great, and because you just don't know any different. And then all of a sudden someone comes in your organization and they get fresh eyes on it, and they're like, there's a hole there, and you're like, whoa, like, we are not good at anything. All of a sudden, like, we actually are horrible at what we do. I don't know why we're even in business. And that's kind of how they make you feel the first day. You're just like, yeah, we should quit. And so he did come into our organization and he was like, you guys need a COO. And in fact, we can't even like go to day 2 until you figure out who that person is. And he forced us to like focus on, okay, like who do we know? Like, and we knew like at the time kind of who we needed and what we needed and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, like he was like, you guys aren't going to be able to do anything until you get to a point where you have like a COO for your organization. Just, and he was able to kind of offer that perspective. And so I'm curious with you, like, what are maybe some example? And he's told me some really funny stories too, by the way. Like, you know, you guys see everything, which is so fun. It's so interesting to me. Like, I would love to be a fly on the wall. But yeah, do you have any stories or examples when you come into a company, you can tell right away this is toxic or we got to change this right now?
Yes, and there's some really good teams out there. It's so easy to pick on the ones that are kind of, to your point, you go in there and you're like, they're like, I'm horrible. Why am I even doing this? I'm like, no, you do a lot of things great. Like, let's hold on a second. Like, just because you're not great at everything doesn't mean you're not a great business owner. But I have one team up north that I was working with the owner, and right out of the gate, like, you know, I would say operations manager, COO at the time was just, oh my gosh, like D off the charts, like questioned everything, didn't actually get anything done. You know, they're all the way through resources. They still don't have numbers on everything. And this guy's like, he's pushing the entire business. He's doing all this stuff. He's working 14 hours a day, like craziness. And he was just like, what do we do? And I was like, well, first thing you do is find you a COO and get rid of her. And I was like, and I'm not saying she's not a person. You know, so a lot of times people are like, they're like, well, I'm like, you can like them, but how much like them outside of work? Like, this is a business, right? Like, we got to separate the two. So it took some pushing and prodding. I was like, you can continue to pull people along brute force, because that's what it was. He was just dragging everybody along, trying to get things done, was making no traction. So finally, after like 3 months pushed and he was able to get somebody else in there, and that person finally quit, and it was good. And it's so nice because I just talked to him even recently, and they are just flourishing, like so happy. He's doing so well. And he's like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know business could be like this. You know, and that's the thing. People don't know what they don't know. Like, to your point, you know, you thought, I have somebody in that seat. It's like, but you don't have the right person in that seat. Like, this person is fighting you tooth and nail every step of the way, and they're not doing anything. So we see a ton of that. I have a team up in Ohio. I say team because it's a small team, right? It's just one guy, and he had 2 sales guys, and, you know, fantastic marketer. But he's like, you know, the whole time I'm talking to him on calls, so we do a lot of fractional COO calls, you know, he's having to put me on hold because he's answering the phone. He's answering his seller calls. And I was like, what are you doing? I was like, you got to get somebody on your phone. Like, you got to get a lead manager, and, you know, we're pushing on this stuff. And so then he was still the TC. He's dispoing everything. You know how we go from that, like, one man show, but like, we're like, I think I can't afford it. Right. So, you know, push, he got a lead manager. He was able to move on his acquisitions rep. He got a TC person. Like, I work with them every week and every other week. And so we're talking just this week, and I was like, hey, like, think about it. He's like, I was just telling somebody, like, this time last year, I was answering the phone, I was buying the houses, I was TCing the deals, I was doing the dispo. And he said, the only thing I do right now is manage other people, and I'm still in project management. And he's like, and I'm not getting, they went into this year, like, you know, I think last year they did somewhere around 600,000, and they're projected, they came into this year with their pipeline at 700. So just hunkering down, like focusing inwards about like, how do we get better, you know, kind of almost probably broke even last year, but was already projected this year. Like, he was willing to put in the work to get the right people in the right seats to get to this level. So I personally, when you ask me like, what do you enjoy? I love that. Getting to see these teams that just don't know what, they're so in the weeds, right? And that's a lot of us when we start out, we're doing every role. We're wearing every hat. And so it's, you know, they're like, just help me. Like, what do I do? So I really enjoy working with them, going through their whole business and being like, okay, here are the areas that we need to improve on. And here are the areas that you do really good. I feel like a lot of people are always, especially in this industry, they're always so hard on themselves. They're so competitive, high A's. And they're like, I suck at everything. I'm like, no, you don't. You suck at this. It's okay. We can work on this. But like, you're really good at this. Like, you really need to acknowledge what you are good at too. Everybody's so hard on themselves.
I'm sure there's a lot of counseling going on in that regard. Just because, again, like I got to experience it as well, and you go through that roller coaster of I'm horrible at everything. Maybe we're not that bad. You know what? We're actually okay. And then,
Yeah.
you just kind of go, and that's basically like I guess a year for us is it's just this. It's never steady. It's never normal. It really does almost depend on the hour sometimes, where you're like, how you feel about yourself in this business. And that's just being a business owner. But I love, though, that you get the opportunity to just see the journey and see it in so many different ways with so many different people and collect so much data. And so I guess one other question that I have, then I want to get to like our three questions I ask everyone at the end. At what point do you know, like, and maybe you have kind of some rule of thumbs around this, but at what point do you know that you need to hire someone?
Oh gosh, it's a really tough question because it doesn't apply the same for everybody. First of all, are you doing something that you don't need to be doing? I always ask people all the time, they're like, I can do it and I don't need to hire. I'm like, think about your time and energy, right? You're probably a $200 to $300 an hour person. You're doing $10 an hour tasks. So that's the first question I tell people, like, what are you doing that you don't need to be doing? Like, don't even forget, like I can't afford, like, just put a list together. What are you doing that you don't need to be doing that somebody else could be doing? And then also, if you hired somebody else, are they going to make you money or are they going to cost you money? Like, that's what we really got to dig into. Like, if you did 2 more deals a year, it would pay for this person. That's usually the crux that most people, once they get there and realize, they're like, I can't afford it. But honestly, if I did 2 more deals and I had time to focus on this would pay for this person. So are you doing things that you don't need to be doing? Asking that question. Is there somebody who can be doing it better? A lot of people are doing a lot of things and they just do it as their side hustle or their side job, and they do other things. Like, I can buy houses, but like, I do the marketing on the side. I'm like, if you had somebody who's really good at marketing that could drive more leads through here, would you do more deals? So are you doing things that you shouldn't be doing? Are there things that somebody else could be doing it better? 110%. And what's the opportunity cost? Like, what are you not doing? What are you not getting accomplished? And how are you not growing because you don't have this seat? So I really like to dig in and ask those questions. Could it be outsourced, like quickly and easily, like based on the size of your business? Like, first of all, can we outsource it? If not, what's the cost change on that? And can we just hire somebody to do it? And we just start with one. I'm like, you really need 5 roles, truly, but like, let's just start with one. Let's get one person else on the team. And when people start to see that benefit, and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know life could be like this. I'm like, yeah, it's very doable. Like, we can grow, right? We feel like we're the only people. That's the hard part.
Yes. Yeah. No, you're right. And what's so funny, because I recently hired a business operations manager. And it was the greatest hire I think I've ever had. I'm trying to think of, like, I've hired so many people. First of all, I have an executive assistant that's been with me for 7 years, and she is like, could not do life without her, love her to death. And she knows that. And she's not allowed to ever leave. And so anything she wants, I'm like, whatever you want. I just want to keep happy. So she's phenomenal. But yeah, I hired this business operations manager. And what I realize is, like, there's so many things that I'm not good at and I don't enjoy, and it drains me. And so I hired him, and it's been fun to see, like, oh man, he's actually really good at accounting, and I can utilize him to kind of oversee that.
Yeah.
And then, he's really good at all the things basically that I'm not good at, And then I started to, one of the things that I have come to realize is I have fired now myself from hiring anyone. I'm not allowed to hire anymore, because I like everyone, and I think that everyone's great, and they all have potential, and they all could be great, and I don't care who they are. I'm just like, yeah, they got redeeming qualities. I think we could figure it out, make it work. And so I learned, as I had him in those interviews with me, we would get out and I'd be like, man, I like them, like they're pretty cool, and they do this, and he's like, absolutely not. Like, there's no way they would ever work. And let me tell you why. And he gives me all these examples. I'm like, I didn't even pick up on that. You're right. Like, those are all things that would make them a horrible fit for that role. And so I was like, you know what? I'm fired. I can no longer hire anyone. And so it's kind of the joke in our office, like, when they come in and they think they're talking to the boss, I'm like, no, it's not me. I actually need to run it by, my business operations guy, because he has a really good, litmus test for just cutting through the bull crap and getting straight to the meat. And I don't. And so it's been fun to and I've also realized I just need to stop doing things that I'm not good at or that drain me. And the quicker I hire and get those tasks delegated, I've just realized like we're growing so much faster now that I used to wait until it was like painfully obvious. Then we were desperate. Then we would hire the wrong person because we would just hire the first one that came through the door because we needed it filled, to your point. And so anyways, like it's just fun to kind of go through that journey and be like, okay, I've done this enough times. I've done all these things wrong. And then eventually you figure out, it took me 15 years to realize I should never be hiring people in the first place. So
yeah, well, honestly, really what you're doing a lot of times is measuring, like you're probably a really good person to measure culture fit and core values, right? It's like one thing that with the owner I worked with, like it was the same thing at a certain point, like you're not allowed to pick people out anymore, right? Like you can interview, you can join the interview and you can attest to culture and core values, right? Like you can fill that out and make sure they're a fit for the team. But it comes to skill sets and it's like, I like this person. I'm like, that's cool. Go play golf with them. Like, but we're not hiring them. Right? Like we can like people. That doesn't mean they're the right person for our team. Right? And we're not doing them. And that's why I tell people, they're like, well, they need the opportunity. I'm like, we're not doing them any favors, putting them in a role they're not going to be good at. And nor keeping people. You know, people really struggle with like keeping the wrong people. And they're like, well, I'm like, you're not doing them any favors. Like you're holding them back from finding a career or an opportunity they could be really good at. Nobody's happy in this situation. It's a breakup that everybody's avoiding. It's like, rip the Band-Aid off, right? We've got to move forward.
So true. Yeah, so true. And then I guess that's the other thing that I really have learned and I would encourage people to do, because you talked about the customer journey, figuring that out. But then you also, whenever you hire someone, you have to know what's the 30, 60, 90-day onboarding process look like. Not just, hey, the first day, going to do some work with you. Day 2, a little bit less. And then day 3, you're on your own, figure it out, sink or swim, see you later. That's generally how I would do it in the past. And so now, again, that's another reason why I hired someone that loves processes and putting together like training programs and stuff. Because, yeah, like you want to set people up for success, because otherwise, yeah, you're not doing them a favor, to your point. You put them in a role they don't enjoy, they're not good at, and everyone's miserable. And so just, you got to pay attention to those signs. And so what I tell our sales reps is, in the first 90 days, you should be able to fire yourself. So like you will know for a fact if you're the right fit, and you'll be able to tell me if you are or not, because you'll know your production and all that kind of stuff. Here's all the metrics. If you're not hitting them, let's just make it easy on everyone and go find something else that you're good at, you know? And I've found that that's just so refreshing, because they're like, oh, at least I'll know, and I'm not wasting years of my life on a dead end job, I guess, you know? So
yeah, absolutely.
Just
and like that 30, 60 days rule, I agree. And a lot of people, they're like, I don't have that. I'm like, it doesn't have to be this big formal thing, right? But if you don't know what success looks like for that person at 30 days, at 60 days, at 90 days, how are they supposed to know? And so often I see that with teams, and somebody will be like, I'm doing a great job, and this person's like, they're awful. I'm like, that disconnect like there, like whoever the leader is, like that's your failure, not theirs, right? Let's be crystal clear. To your point, I've never, well, I don't say never, but had one fire one time that I had to do, and it was the most painful termination I'd ever done in my career. And I, have done plenty. And it wasn't because it was just big. It's because he didn't see it coming. And I wasn't this direct report, and I thought all the stuff was there. And so I was just kind of, as a COO, or, I'm a part of all of these terminations. So I joined this one, and he was just so blindsided, like begged for his job, his thing. And this was a great person, like really nice guy. I mean, it hurt my soul to that point. And I was like, the problem right there is not that is that he didn't know it was coming. And I made a vow that day, and I was like, I will never terminate somebody again that does not know that they're failing, right? And that's a failure on my part. It's a failure on the person that was managing that person. Like, I don't blame, but nobody should ever be blindsided. Like, first of all, I should have set good expectations and had regular communications. I'm not talking about pips. You'll hear me on other stuff, and I'm not a fan of pips. But we should be having candid conversations of what that looks like. If I let you go, you are not surprised. You're going to be like, I tried, right? But we're going to part as friends. But if I blindside you, that's my failure, not yours.
Man, such a good point. Such a good point. Yeah, like if you think about the hardest times where you had to let someone go, you're right. Like, and I think we can all think of like those 1 or 2 instances. And I've had this thing. I remember the very first person that I fired. It was the worst, most awkward experience I've ever had in my life, probably. Like I've had better breakups with girlfriends than I did when it came to, having to do that, because it was, you avoid it. You wait till Friday afternoon. They're on their way out and you're like, hey, and you just start stumbling and you just you're not confident. They didn't see it coming. They're like, why didn't we have these conversations? Like, I don't know, a year ago. That would have been nice to know that you didn't like how I was doing my job. And so I agree with you. There is like beauty in candor. Just be real with people. Like, don't fake it. Like, if they're not doing a good job, let them know, but in a nice way, just in a very, and I think that the easiest way that I've found to do that is just like, here's our KPIs. You'll know if you're doing a good job or not. And then to your point, there's been so many times where it's so vague. They show me like, I think I'm doing okay. I don't know. And I'm like, no, this person's horrible.
Right. And if they think they're doing a good job and I think they're not, like there's a major disconnect, right? Usually it's on my end.
Worst.
And the reason I'm not a fan of PIPs is because they don't, in my experience, they never drive the outcome that we're looking for. It's a very common terminology people use. And, they're like, all you're telling somebody when you put them on a PIP is it's not when, it's not if I fire you, it's when, right? So what I really like to do is go into the situation and say, let's talk about this. This is the areas that I see that you're struggling. And here's what I'd really like for you to put a plan together. Like, let's talk about this. We're going to meet again. Like, here's where I need you to be. And I don't think I need to tell you how to get there, right? I really want your feedback. So let's meet again next week. I want you to bring a plan together. Let's work together, right? Like, I'm going to support you and I'm here for you, but I'm not going to tell you what to do. Because I'm really looking for people, period, on my team that can make that can take that. And if they show back up with nothing, if I let you go, we talked about it. I gave you the opportunity. I'm willing to coach and mentor you. At that point, when they leave, and a lot of times most people just quit. And that's my overall experience. They'll just be like, hey, I really appreciate the opportunity. This isn't a fit for me. I'm like, I get it. It's not for everybody. Thank you. Let's part ways. Right? I have to fire a lot less people if I have those communications on the front end and like, help me help you. But a lot of times if they see the writing on the wall, they just quit.
Yeah. Yeah. So PIPs are, performance improvement plan. And I'm so with you on that, because in my last business partner, he'd always be like, well, have we given him a chance? Have we done a PIP? And I'm like, man, I hate the concept of doing a PIP. That is like the dumbest, because you're right. It's not if, it's when. And with you dictating the terms and all that kind of stuff, it just never works. So I love what you did there, where you turned it around, said, hey, if you want this job, come with some plan to remedy the situation. We have a disconnect. And if you don't come up with anything, well, then there you go. Like, we're okay. And we'll stay friends, but it's okay. It's not the right fit. Wow, that's so smart. I love that. Okay. So I have 3 questions that I like to ask at the end of all the podcasts. And so the first one, and I'm sure you'll have lots of these actually. So what is like a podcast or a book that you've read like in the last year, or just a book that you typically will recommend to people, maybe in business, life, doesn't matter. Just like, what's something that you're reading or listening to that you like?
Oh, so many. And I'm sure you get that with everybody. Yeah, we talk about this often. So everybody's kind of the tried and true ones, right? Like, we kind of know, like, my favorite one that I'm rereading recently is The Road Less Stupid, Advice from the Chairman of the Board. It's one of my favorite all-time books.
I forgot about that book.
So good.
That's a good book. Thank you.
It's good for re-listening. Yeah. But there's a newer book out that I've really been recommending lately, and it's fun. It comes up at CG quite a bit. It's Cameron Herold's Second in Command, right? And it's kind of a newer book. I know he wrote Vivid Vision, which is, not my favorite book, but Second in Command, I read that recently, and I was like, man, as a COO, sitting in that seat for a lot of years, if I was going to write a book about my experience as a COO and what that communication and that relationship looks like, it would pretty much be very similar to this. So I've really recommended that book a lot to people that are kind of looking for that number 2 or how do we build that relationship. Most people just don't know what they don't know. So it's a newer book. I believe he is going to be a speaker at the next master, which it's really good, but it's a really fantastic book. Like I said, there's a lot of great books out there, but it's a newer one. And if you're looking at or how to operate an ops manager or COO or kind of that number 2, it is a fantastic read for both parties.
Awesome. Cool. Well, that I'm excited for. That's why I like to ask the question, because it's also selfishly for me. Okay. Over the last, let's say that you were able to go back 10 years from now, or 10 years ago, knowing what you know now, is there something that you would implement right away that you're like, man, now that I've gone through it and I've kind of passed the stupid stuff, and realized over and over again what not to do, is there something that you would do right off the bat that you would change in your career?
Yes, and you're going to love this. Everybody, all the mavericks and adventurers in the world love the word processes, right? It's so sexy, such a sexy word. However,
right.
This is one of those areas that everybody's like, I documented it, and then they really didn't. And two, we don't maintain them, right? The COO owner I worked with used to tell me, like, we suck at documenting processes, and I'd get so frustrated. But like, if you say we suck one more time, I'm like, now granted, we wrote them, now we didn't maintain them. So if I had to go back in time and do one thing that would have probably eliminated so much frustration in my career and others on my team as well, is when I document process, I would have worked with the team, right, to do it and do it right, but I would have kept them up on a regular basis, right? Because what happens is we document something and this business changes so fast that 6 months later, it's like, oh yeah, we don't do that anymore. But then I'll hire somebody and I'll put them through training on an old process. And I'll be like, well, here's how we do it, but we really do it this way. Like, how am I setting them up for success? So if I had to go back in time and do one thing that I thought would have got me past the startup phase a lot quicker, I would have done better, or at least hired somebody or done anything to build better processes and procedures for the team, because that was so much of the frustration always came back, is that people are process. It's usually process 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's great feedback. Love that. And I would be that same guy saying we suck at processes. So I can totally hear my voice in there. Okay, great one. So the third question then is there if you look back on your life, is there a specific year that was super pivotal for you that looking back, you're like, man, that was kind of a turning point, good or bad, whatever. But like, was there a year that you can look back on, and why?
I know the answer I should give, but I know the answer that comes to mind, honestly. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs, this really resonates with, 29, I have 2 kids out of the house. I'm older. The employee at the team just starts checking their blood pressure. They thought they had high blood pressure. They start checking it, right? Not a big deal. We're rolling, right? 2021, everybody's just like, it was not expecting. Everybody's super busy. Everybody's in growth mode. They're scaling. Like, if you weren't selling, we had wins that are back, right? Everybody was doing phenomenal at this point that I know of in this business. So anyway, I started checking. We check our blood pressure just for fun. We're looking at it. 220 over 140. That's my norm. When I realized, and I stopped, and it was the first indicator, is like, I need to slow down a minute. Like, I'm all in, right? As entrepreneurs and just as leaders, we're always just grinding away, and we feel like that's what we need to do. But that was the first indicator. So I actually checked, went to the doctor, looked up. I'm just like, here I am running this really good business, and it's great, but my health is crap. I'm not doing what I need to be doing. I'm not happy. I'm working 12 hours a day. I'm working 6 days a week, and I feel like I have to. So even working with other entrepreneurs and stuff, I'm like, this is great, but we have to be realistic in what that looks like for ourselves. Like, we'll sacrifice ourselves for our business. And I was, it was just pivotal year for me to realize that, like, if you break something, you can fix it. If you lose money, you can make more money. But if you spend 8 hours a day doing something that you can, that you don't like to do, you can never get that time back. That was the year that I was just like, hold on, wait a minute. You know what I mean? Like, me, and in my team too, like, we did a big health initiative. It was like, just being that grinder, setting that example. I realized my team was the same way. Like, they're looking at me as an example, as a leader. And so when we're not willing to take care of ourselves, guess what we attract on our team too. So again, I love business. I love real estate, but also, there's no U-Haul on a hearse. So I think as leaders, we have to be mindful to not only take care of ourselves personally in order to take care of others and to grow our team. So that's the one thing I really wish, in this industry, I wish I work with a lot of people. I'm like, let's just take a breath for a minute. Like, what does that really look like? Are you happy? I'm not saying we stop what we're doing, but like, let's be realistic. If we don't save lives, we are not doctors. There's no such thing as a real estate emergency, right? Being tethered to my cell phone all the time and the text messages and things like that. I'm like, if a house catches on fire, call 911, then tell me about it. But we don't always have to react, right? We just feel like we're firefighters. We're constantly like just reacting to situations. And I could go a whole hour in an opposite direction on this that I work with other leaders and owners too. But it's really about, that was the pivotal year for me when I looked up and realized, like, you know what, I have a really successful career. I have a lot of great relationships, but man, you know, my doctor's like, if something doesn't feel like, I need you to just go straight to the hospital. Like, don't call me, just 911. She's like, you are so hypertensive and you are so unhealthy that, like, you know, that was a huge wake up moment for me in this business. And we kind of tend to be all in sometimes where, you know, but we have to be mindful if we don't take care of ourselves, you know, the people we're not doing a service to our family or our loved ones either. So that's the one thing I want to share the most with people.
Yeah, such great advice. Love it. And yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where we all think we have this priority on money, and we just think, oh, it's going to be great, it'll provide security and all those kind of things. But then, yeah, when you have a health scare like that, it's like, I don't care if I had all the money in the world. Like, that's not going to compensate for me dying and leaving my, you know, kids stranded and spouse and all those kind of things and people that depend on me. So yeah, I love that. Take care of yourself first, because otherwise, you're right, you're not going to be able to help other people nearly as much if you feel like crap yourself. And so, yeah, and it is something that I think a lot of us suffer from, that are entrepreneurs, mavericks, that are constantly trying to improve. We do need to take some time to reflect and think about, you know, the bigger picture kind of stuff. So
Prioritize what's really important. So that's the one biggest thing I try to share with people. It's like, let's put this in perspective. Most people start a business because they want financial freedom. But when you look up 10 years later, 20 years later, and you're working 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, and you're in every area of your business all the time, do you, like, you might be making millions a year, you might be doing $2 million a year, but are you happy? Like, you know, what's the trade-off there? So really working with teams to be like, what is your why? What are we trying to accomplish? And let's help get you there. It's not just about making more money. You can't take it with you.
Yeah, so true. And I think, like, I guess the final point with that is, I know a lot of people now are asking the question, like, when do you know what's enough? Like, at what point is it enough? So I do think that's also a question that you need to think through yourself and with your spouse and family. Like, hey, there will come a point, and there should come a point. You need to know, hey, when I hit this mark, let's take the foot off the gas a little bit. Let's hand it off, and then let's enjoy, you know? And so just take time to enjoy it, because time is like the most precious asset that we have.
Absolutely.
So, wow. Thank you so much for sharing all of your experiences, your time. I knew this was going to be awesome. Leon was right, and I never doubt him for a minute when he gives me a referral. So thank you, Amanda, for coming on the show.
I really appreciate it. I enjoy it. Thank you.
I want to thank everyone for taking the time to listen to this podcast. It's the best part of my week. I love learning from others' failures, and let's be honest, failures are way more enjoyable when you're not the one experiencing them in the moment. If you or someone you know has a story or experience to share, we would love to have you on the show. And please do not forget to like and share this podcast with anyone you feel would get value from the experiences shared on this show. Until the next show, remember to fail fast and fail often. Thanks for listening to the Rush to Fail podcast.